And I want to give just a quick shout out to CleanTrain U. So this is a piece of software that we've been working to develop that has launched in 2022. That Connor Minogue is overseeing this project for us. He's running the CleanTrain U platform. So training in our industry, particularly at the cleaner level and at the manager level, is something that's difficult to pull off and to do it well and to do it in a way that's systematized, and there's not a good platform for it, and there's not really that much good content out there in terms of video. And so that's a solution that we have been working for the last 2 years to try to solve. So if training and standardizing your training is something that you would like to see happen at your organization, I would encourage you to check out CleanTrain U. There's a link in the chat box, I believe, and that is for the website to this is cleantrainu.com, cleantrainu.com. You can check that out. We've got a bunch of companies that already signed up with the platform, and we'd be happy to do a demo for you on CleanTrain U. So, all right, so let's get right into our topic in terms of, I want to just lay out, if you guys are going to spend 45 minutes, 50 minutes with me, I want to give you an expectation of what we're going to talk about. So I want to be a good steward of your time. And so here's where we're going to go with this content. So first of all, why did I pick the number $2 million? Like, why is this an important number if you're trying to grow your business and get it to a certain spot, or you've got a new branch operation that you'd like to develop? Why is $2 million a magical number? And I kind of think that it is. And so I'm gonna talk about that for a minute. We're gonna talk a little bit about why people don't get to this number. So what are the things, this will sort of be interspersed throughout a lot of what we do today, but why do people struggle to get here? What is it about 2 million bucks or somewhere in this ballpark that makes it hard for people to get there? What are the roadblocks? And I see people, a lot of people struggle to actually hit these kinds of numbers, and they get stuck somewhere. And I think there are reasons for that, and we're going to talk about those. And then we're going to look at 10 different traits. Okay, so we're going to look at 4 different traits that you need as an individual in order to expect to hit these sorts of numbers in your company and beyond. And then we're going to look at, so that's 4 traits individually, and then 6 traits that should characterize your organization. So for any entrepreneur, there are certain things on the personal end that you need to get right in terms of how you are, how you interact with the organization, and how you function, and then also certain traits that the business itself must have in order to achieve the numbers that you want to get to. And so that's where we're going to go with our time today. And also, just as a side note, if you have questions along the way and would like those answered, if you've got, I'll be happy to stop if the question is relevant to the content that we're talking about as the webinar goes on. I'll try to answer those the best that I can along the way. So, okay, let's go with this first question of why $2 million as the goal. So the statistics for people who start businesses and actually stay in that business so that you last at least 5 years are pretty grim. Some of the statistics I've heard have been, somewhere around 20% of people make it actually to that 5-year mark. So 4 out of 5 businesses are gone within 5 years. And then for the people who make it an additional 5 years, it's like 20% of those people. So basically 1 out of 10 people ultimately make it to 10 years. And really, probably most of those do not hit a revenue number like this number here. So as I look at, and we've done some benchmarking surveys, and I've looked at a lot of surveys in our industry, if you make it to the $2 million mark in our industry, you sort of set yourself, you've sort of went over that plateau, and you're now into a tier of companies that's a bit different, that's separated itself from the rest of the industry. Obviously, a lot of big brothers and big sisters out there that are much larger, but most companies hang out in the $1 million or under range. So there's thousands of janitorial companies in the country, thousands, probably tens of thousands, but most of them will never hit $1 million in revenue. And so once you hit $2 million in revenue, it oftentimes signifies a couple of things for you. So number one, I think it signifies as a general rule that there is a certain amount of stability in your organization. And by that, what I mean is that you've had some structures built into the company that the company has begun to take on a bit of a life of its own. And so anything less than 2 million, especially anything under $1 million, usually the owner is generally really involved in the organization. And the owner is going to have their hands in all of the different pieces. So they're really the CEO, the chief everything officer. And but once you start to grow, and particularly once you hit 2 million and above, it's just not possible for the owner to have their hands in every piece of the organization. So if you're able to get there and you stay there, what that typically means is that the owner has had to pass off certain functions in the company to other people, and has had to build in some systems and structures in the organization. And when that starts to happen, the company takes on a life of its own. And when a company begins to take on a life of its own, apart from the owner, you know that you're not only stable, but that you're setting yourself up for future growth and for future stability and longevity for the organization over the long haul. And so I think $2 million is a good marker for that. And this is also true on the branch level. So we have started up a handful of branch offices in different cities and different states. And usually once we get to that million, million and a half, and in particular $2 million, we know that we've really executed well and that branch is pretty solid for the long haul. When we hang out in the $500,000 to $1 million range, there's still a decent amount of risk involved. But once we bump up there to $1.5 million, 2 million, we know that we're on really solid footing here in terms of that branch being successful in the long haul. Okay, number 2 is going to be personal compensation. So you can make some good money in the industry, if you're at $1 million in revenue. I think if you're at less than $1 million, you're going to struggle making 6 figures, unless you're just sucking the company dry. But once you hit that $2 million number, likely you're starting to develop or get some financial results, because there's a decent amount of cash coming and going through the organization. And if the profitability is decent, the likelihood of you getting the kind of personal compensation you would like is starting to become more and more of a reality. And that gets even greater over the long haul. Now, ours in our company wasn't particularly great at $2 million, but we were trying to reinvest back in the organization. But as I've worked with other clients and I've seen a lot of P&Ls over the years, I know that when companies are doing well with the revenue they have, and once they've hit that $2 million mark, I know the kind of money that owners can make at that point. And so that's, again, why this is significant, because you all didn't get into this business to just eke it out over the next 20 years. You got in this, at least in part, to find some financial freedom. All right, and then the next thing that I think all of us are looking for as business owners is to have some level of personal freedom. So, and by that, I don't mean laying on the beach and just doing whatever the heck you want to do all the time, but the idea that the business should be life-giving, that as it takes on a life of its own, you get pieces of your life back. And that's what we're hoping for. And when you hit the $2 million number, because of some of the structures that are built into the company, that's actually more and more of a reality. So when I was in the business early on, it felt like it owned me because there were so many demands. But as structures and things got built into the organization, that freedom started to come over time. And for me, it's meant, reinvesting and doing other things. Part of that is this, coaching and helping other contractors in the industry. But that's why this is significant. So it is a monumental number. It indicates stability, and it indicates personal freedom and hopefully a decent compensation. So that's why I've singled out this particular number as the thing that we're aiming for, either on a company level or the branch level. All right, so let's do this. We're going to dive into the 10 keys of making this happen. And just to give you a little bit of background on this, and I mentioned this at the beginning, but over the last 5 years since I started Elite BSC and have been working with other contractors, and part of my aim at the very beginning, coaches and consultants do a lot of different things. And my desire or my niche has been, I want to help people figure out how to scale up their business. So I want to help them achieve the sorts of things we were talking about in the previous slide. And what I've seen, and it's fascinated me, and it's it's something I want to research and dive into more as time goes on. But I've watched some people that have built businesses, really successful businesses, and have done it really quickly. And so it's like they just zoomed through the numbers, you know, 1 million, 2 million, 3, 4, 6, 10, you know, like they did it really quickly, right? And sometimes I'm amazed. I'm like, man, you guys are knocking it out of the park. And some of them have done it at a faster clip than what we've done it. And so I see that happening on one end, and it's not because these people are just savants or brilliant. Like they, you know, they're obviously sharp people. But anybody that's an entrepreneur has to have certain qualities. You can't be an idiot. And so, but then as I look at other people, I've done a lot of consulting with companies that are stuck somewhere and they just flat out can't move beyond where they're at. And it's been frustrating for me because I want to help, and it's difficult to put my finger sometimes on why that has happened. And so this presentation really is, as I have studied and researched and talked with clients and tried to dissect some of this. These are 10 things that, from my experience and reading and communicating with other people in the industry, these are 10 things that I think characterize the people that are able to grow and grow fast and do it well and build a great company. And these are commonalities I see in those people that I don't see as much in the companies that struggle to move forward. But what's interesting about them is all of them are either learnable or doable things. They're things you can change. And so if you're somebody that is stuck and you're frustrated, maybe you're frustrated at me that I couldn't help you, these are all things. Some of them are disciplines, some of them are qualities that you can begin to work on that will help you get there. And so my encouragement is that there is hope for everybody in this process. Okay, so the first one is grit. Now, I'm currently reading this book by Angela Duckworth called Grit, and it's a fascinating read. Has her PhD in psychology. I think she went to Harvard, and something that she is showing in her research, and it's something that's a little bit intuitive for a lot of us, but that success is primarily rooted in someone's grit or their work ethic or how much energy they put into something as opposed to the talent that they have. So some people are more naturally sales oriented or are better with numbers or whatever than other people, and there is some DNA components. But time and time again, and you can look at, you know, she analyzes people in the military, she analyzes students in inner city schools, all across the, you know, musicians. And at the end of the day, it is more effort that is a determiner of success than the actual innate talent that somebody is born with. And we tend to think the opposite. So we look at Bill Gates, we look at, you know, Mark Cuban, or, you know, whoever, some of these more wildly successful business owners, entrepreneurs, and we just think that they're on this whole other plane than everybody else. And she shows in her research that really just isn't the case. And so the first characteristic is that it has got to be somebody that has grit, that is willing to plow day in and day out, constantly striving for excellence, and is willing to do that week after week, month after month, year after year, to continue pushing forward. And that it's almost impossible to have that sort of mentality and not build something that you find success in. And so she talks about having that this grit is characterized by having an interest in something. So it's got to be something you like or enjoy to do on some level, that you find purpose in it. And this is pretty important, and we won't dive into this today. Obviously, we would go way off track, but you see the purpose in what you're doing. And this is the big one, that you practice. And so this is the idea she talks about a lot in her research, is that you are getting better and better and better at your craft. and you are working at it, working at it, working at it, working at it. So a lot of you feel like, well, man, I'm working all the time. But really what's happening is you're constantly putting out fires and you're dealing with the tyranny of the urgent. And what she means by practice is that you're laboring to become better and better and better at your craft, at what you do. And then hope is this component that is sort of this thing. I'm hoping to sell hope to you guys today, that that's what's out there in front of you, and that's what drives this whole process. So I would encourage you guys to pick up that book if you haven't already done it. It's a great read, and you may be able to find her on YouTube as well, if you need a condensed version or a Cliff Notes version of it. But this, by far and away, is, I think, a quality that has to be there. Okay, number 2, this is a big one here. This is one that I see this in terms of my observation in people, is the relationship that they have with growth. So whether we're talking branching out, or we're talking about somebody that's starting a cleaning business or has built something, maybe you're $500,000, $750,000, or whatever. The people that I've watched that have scaled up, that have went from 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, whatever. I actually just had a phone call with a guy this morning that has built like a $7 million business in the last 2 or 3 years. All right, crazy amounts of growth. And then I see people get stuck at $750,000 or whatever. And what's interesting to me is, as I've watched and observed these people, there's a different attitude or a different relationship that these 2 different types of individuals have towards growth. So the companies that do press on and hit those revenue targets that they want to hit, in their minds, there's this commitment to growth at all costs. Like the foot is on the gas pedal no matter what. So even if things are not going well, if they have issues, if they're suffering from staff issues, or whatever it is, they're still pushing for growth. Like that's it's the engine of the train, right? It's not the caboose. It's not the thing that follows up. If everything goes well, we'll grow. No, actually growth is on the front end, and that's what's pushing the whole thing down the tracks. And the people that get stagnant, where I often find them hanging out, is they're constantly looking at the problems or the issues in their business and trying to figure out how to solve them. And because their focus is so much on those operational issues or HR issues or whatever it is, they're hesitant and maybe fearful, and they don't go after the growth. And so it gets into this vicious cycle that they're in, that they get stuck where they're at. They're trying to fix what's there. They lose customers, they replace customers, and there's never really a primary emphasis on growth. So some things that characterize this, or things that I think contribute to it, one's the tyranny of the urgent. I've mentioned that once, I'll probably say it again a handful of times, is that urgent tasks, so customer complaints or an operational issue, or I got to get this done today, those urgent tasks become the thing that are the taskmaster, the slave driver, and detract or keep you away from growth. All right, that's one. The next one is operational analysis paralysis. So some people they feel the need to get their operation just right. Like, hey, I can't grow until I get this right. I can't grow until we have this process in place, or I'm afraid to grow if we don't get this right. And so this constant going back to the drawing board, tweaking until they get their operations right, ends up paralyzing them to not be able to grow at all. Again, the very common characteristic that I see in those that get stuck. Fear of failure is one, but again, I'll emphasize again that growth, if you want to hit $2 million at the branch level or as a company, growth has got to be front and center. And what's fascinating about growth, if you're one of those people that struggles with the operational analysis paralysis or the tyranny of the urgent, is growth actually creates opportunities within the organization to fix those problems. So think about it this way. Let's imagine that you've got staff and you're not super satisfied with the manager level people you have. You're stuck at a certain revenue number. Like, I can't grow, my management is not great, but I can't afford to pay for somebody. I'm paying them $40,000 a year. I can't really afford to pay more than that. And you're sort of in this vicious cycle. Well, the way that you get more staff, or be able to pay more, or be able to up your game in areas, is you need more revenue. Like, you need more challenges out in front of you that are going to equip you with the cash that you need. So in some ways, you need to grow in order to be able to improve your operation. And so growth forces you to fix problems. Growth forces you to deal with more revenue, which then allows you to spend more money on maybe the things that would help you. And so it ends up being a good cycle to be in if you're growing, as opposed to the vicious cycle of being paralyzed. All right, that's number two. That's the second mindset, I would say. So grit would be number one. The second mindset that you need as an owner is commitment to growth at all costs. Okay, the third one, and for those of you all that are in our mastermind group, you've probably heard me say this a million times, and this phrase is so cliche that I'm afraid to even use it, but it's that we're working on the business and not in the business. So Michael Gerber, who wrote the book E-Myth, if you haven't read that book, you definitely should read it and process and chew on the principles that he talks about. But he says, simply put, your job is to prepare yourself and your business for growth. And so what Gerber's talking about is your job as the owner is to treat the business as an entity and work on it in order to be able to prepare it to grow. So, and let me tell you why I think this is important. So I hope this first bullet point's not offensive, but let's just be honest, McDonald's burgers are not that great, right? I've been to lots of good restaurants over the years, and I've eaten at all the fast food ones. There's nothing super special about a McDonald's burger. I mean, they're fine, they're good, and there are certain times, usually like after 10 o'clock at night, that a McDonald's burger hits the spot. But as a general rule, they're just okay. They're not great. Now, but McDonald's is a wildly successful organization and is all over the world. And again, we could go with any fast food chain here to talk about this. It's not, even Chick-fil-A, like us in the South, we love Chick-fil-A, right? But even Chick-fil-A, like their food is fine, it's good, and I like it. But I've had better chicken sandwiches and chicken nuggets, etc. So what's special about Chick-fil-A, or what's special about McDonald's or Starbucks or whatever, is it's the business system that they've created that makes it successful. So sure, they work on their product, and they did early on, but it's the system, it's the business as a whole that has generated or created the success. So they sell a product, which is food, but it's as they sell to franchisees and they grow, it's the system that has value. It's the system that makes the company stable. And so in the same way, that's the way we need to view our companies, that we're trying to create something, an entity on its own that carries value. And that requires from you as the owner a mindset that you're working on the system, on the business, and not in it trying to make it all happen. And again, in early stages, and maybe even for a while, you have to be in it because you don't have the money to let somebody else do all of that stuff. But that mindset has got to be there, and it's got to stay there. And it just only makes sense, right? Like your reach is only so wide. You can only keep your hands around so much in the organization before things will start to fall apart. So all the control freaks right now are having a panic attack, but in reality, you can't control everything. And so you've got to begin letting go. And that happens when we begin to work on the business and not so much in the business. And really your goal is that you're trying to create a company that doesn't need you. So Gerber has this funny line in one of his talks that he gives. He talks about entrepreneurs and business owners that he is interacting with, and they love the business they built, and they're so proud of themselves. I built the business. That damn business wouldn't be here if it wasn't without me. And Gerber goes on like this long rant that he goes on, and what's funny about it is like, but that's actually terrible, right? If the business wouldn't go on without those people, then it shows that they've not built something that is beyond themselves. They've not built something that has outlasted them, and that's a failure on the owner's part. So this is our third one. In addition to grit and commitment to growth, is that we have this mindset of working on the business and not in the business. Okay, the last one, the last personal attribute that you need is commitment to learning and growing yourself. And obviously on the personal end. So you want to round out your own skills personally, but also I'm here thinking more in terms of your leadership skills, your understanding of business and marketing and how to run an organization. These in particular are the areas of learning or growth that I'm talking about. So Gerber, this is a great quote from him. He says, "My experiences show me that the people who are exceptionally good in business aren't so because of what they know, but because of their insatiable need to know more." And this is very true. The thing that got me going in reading a long time ago is Dave Ramsey talked about one time that successful people read on average like 2 books a month. And his point he was making was that people who are successful in their careers or entrepreneurs who are successful, they read a lot. And because the more content we have in our brains, the more tools we have to work with in the organization. So John Maxwell talks about the law of the lid in his book, 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And what he means there is your leadership capacity is sort of the lid on the organization. So if your capacity as an individual in terms of your leadership and your knowledge within the organization, the lower that lid is for you, the lower the capacity for the organization. So you've got to constantly be upping your game and have a mindset of that's what I'm going to do. You can't get relaxed. You can't get complacent in this. You've constantly got to be growing yourself if you want the business to follow suit. So obviously that means reading good books. I think also, and again, I'm going to shameless plug here a little bit, but that means getting involved in the industry, maybe getting coaching in the industry, surrounding yourself with peers, joining organizations, and filling your mind and your time with content and people who are going to help you get from where you're at to where you want to go. So real quick, I think someone's going to type in the chat box the link for this, elitebsc.com. So this is basically why we made our mastermind group, is that so that we could provide this, because this is something, as I was looking to grow in the industry, I struggled to find the kind of content that I needed in order to be able to get where I wanted to go. And so that's why we do what we do here. In our group, we have a forum where you can connect with peers. We do, one-to-one coaching. We provide, all sorts of systems and processes and training videos and all that kind of stuff. So obviously this is not your whole diet of leadership and business information, but as it pertains to things in our industry and leading in our industry, that's what we're trying to provide. So elitebsc.com, you can check some of that stuff out. We'd be happy to talk to you about that. Okay, so we've looked at the personal characteristics, so the personal traits of grit, commitment to growth, working on the business, not in it, and a commitment to learning. So that's on the individual side, the mindsets you need to have. So now let's shift over and look at 6 traits that are needed in the business itself. So in order to hit that $2 million mark, in order to get where you want to go or to build that branch out, there's certain things that need to be true of the business itself that needs to happen. So the first one, and I don't think any of these are in any particular order of importance, and this is going to be more true for those of you that are smaller companies, but I remember this being true of us at one point, is professionalism at all costs. So something that holds people back on the smaller level is that you look small and you play small. And so, and it's easy to swim in those waters with smaller competitors, but when you go out to get bigger business and you want to grow, you want to recruit the right kinds of people on your team, like good talent, you have to have an image that doesn't make you look like mom and pop. So I have nothing against mom and pops, because our company was once a mom and pop. There's nothing wrong with that, but you've got to look, even though you play small, you got to look big, okay? So I'm not suggesting that you go out and, lie about yourself, but here's what I mean by that is that you have to present yourself like the company that you want to be. So, and by this, I just mean like in your website, in your print material, your emails, the way you talk, the way you dress, how you refer to contracts, how you conduct yourself in meetings. Like you want to use the language, have the look and feel of some of your larger competitors. So what I would do if I was a $500,000 company, I'd be scouring the websites of all my competitors and getting involved in groups like BSCI or our mastermind group. And I would be learning the language of the industry. I would be seeing how people conduct themselves, how people talk, the kinds of words that they use. And what you're doing is, even though you're small, you're beginning to project an image, and really an image that you're working into yourself as an organization that can set you apart. This sounds so silly and cheesy, but I'm telling you, you go to a meeting and you got competitors here. Let's say you're a $1 million company and you're going to bid on a job that may be a $20,000 a month job, right? Huge job. It would increase your revenue by 20, 25% as a company. And you're in that meeting and everybody is like 3, 4, 5, 10 times bigger than you. Now, you've got to sell that customer on the fact that you can do this. And one of the ways to do that is, yeah, you don't have that revenue, but you can be the same kind of company that those companies are. And so that's what I'm suggesting. When a customer goes to your website, make sure it looks good. When they see you in person, make sure you look professional like your competitors. When they get your emails, make sure there's not, grammar mistakes everywhere and they don't look janky. Make sure your dress looks good. Make sure the language you use is not, I'll give you a quick for instance on this. If you're in a meeting and you're talking about how you would service the account, don't use, my friend Bob is the manager here at night. Talk about your team like you're an organization, a corporation. Yes, we have an area manager and they take care of our customers on this end of town. And we have a floor crew, and use words like you're the kind of company that you want to be. Okay. This is number one. This is a killer. You don't get this right, like you can really just make yourself look small, and it's going to really put you at a disadvantage to recruit good talent and to get good contracts. Okay, number two out of the 6 as it relates to the company is pick a niche, make a list. So a mistake that I see a lot of people make is that, and I've done this before too, is, and maybe I'll tee this up with an example. So we were going to try to grow our company into Nashville, Tennessee. So Nashville, a metropolitan population of like pushing 2 million people now. City's growing like crazy. And I remember going down there. It's about a couple hours away from our home office, and I used to live in Nashville. And I remember the first time driving through Nashville with the intent of opening a branch office there. And I just surveyed the skyline and I thought, there are thousands of potential customers here. And we'd already built a, $3, $4 million, $5 million company so far. And I thought, man, we could have a $5, $10 million branch down in Nashville. Like, this place is crazy. Well, 2 years later, or a year and a half later, I didn't have a single customer. And part of it was because I had this mindset that there's so many customers that really what I had done is I had taken what I call a shotgun approach instead of a rifle approach to my sales. So because I saw everybody as a potential customer, I really gained traction with nobody. So I'm a big outdoors person. I love to hunt and fish, and depending on the kind of game I'm going after is going to determine the weapon that I'm going to use, right? So if I'm going after a deer or an elk or something like that, I wouldn't use a shotgun because it's not strong enough to take down the particular animal that I'm going after. But if I was bird hunting, I would use a shotgun because I'd never be able to hit a bird with a rifle. And in sales and going after clients, we've got to use more of a rifle approach, particularly in business to business sales, because our contracts as a general rule can get pretty good size. And so we need to be specialized a little bit. And I think that's pretty important for us. And so our success in sales here has come when we've identified the kind of client that we want. So we make a list of the kind of people that we would like to go after. And then we figure out what they're made of. And then we go build a list of those people. And then we target them and go after them. And it's pretty old school. That's our approach. But let's say we go into a town of 100,000 people. We might make a list 70, 80 long and say, these 70, 80 people are the potential customers we would want to serve here. And that's the only people we're going to call on. So yeah, if I went to Nashville I could probably build a list of 20,000 possible customers. But in reality, there's maybe 100 or 200 there that I really want. And those are the ones that we make a list and try to go after. So there's a phrase that goes around in the internet marketing world that says the riches are in the niches. And the idea is that you should focus and specialize in an area and stick with that, and that's where you'll find success. So if you try to be everything to everybody, you'll end up being nothing to nobody. So put some context on this. In our world, this may mean that you're going to pick a certain geography that you want to be in. It may mean that you pick a certain size customer, that I only want customers between $1,000 and $10,000 a month. It may mean I don't do public facilities, I only do private facilities. Maybe I do private, but I don't do property management companies. Whatever it is, you start to whittle down what your niche is and then begin to go after that particular niche. It feels like you're taking a step backwards, but actually this is the way to get good, consistent, profitable growth in your organization. Okay, that was number 2. Number 3, commit to 100% customer retention. So there's sort of a phrase in the business world that the customer is always right. And I generally don't believe this phrase. Customers are wrong all the time. And sometimes it's appropriate to point that out or whatever. But as you're trying to grow, the things that you need early on is you need consistent revenue, you need consistent cash flow, and you need referrals. You need stability in your organization. And so you can't afford to have losses. There can't be hills that you're dying on to prove a point, or because a customer is a pain in the butt or whatever. You can't afford those losses. And so as I look back at the growth that we had, something we were pretty successful at is once we landed a customer in a new area, we worked really hard that come hell or high water, we kept that customer. And we would fight for it, and we would do everything we had to do in order to maintain that relationship and keep them happy and keep the business from going out to bid. And that's what we did. That's what we tried to do. And again, what that does is it creates a stability that you can build on. So it's really difficult to have customers going out and you're losing customers and you're trying to replace those with new ones. It's a really hard pattern to maintain. And it's like kind of run on the ice, okay? You're not going to get very far very fast. So yeah, the customer is not always right, but in the early stages, you sort of need to treat it like this. Like you're gonna save those customers. You're gonna tough it out. You're gonna get through it in order to build that foundation that you need. So I would just encourage you to have this mindset in the organization and with your team that no matter what, we're gonna hang on to these customers. 100% retention is our goal. And maybe in a year or 2, when you start to hit your revenue goals, maybe you'll take a step back and get rid of some customers or something. But early on, we're going to get them and we're not going to lose them. Okay, number 4, standardize operational processes. All right, so here's where I'm going. Actually, hold on a second here. Yep, that's right, number 4. Okay, standardize operational processes. So processes in your company are, the best way that I can think of to describe them are like habits in your organization. So if you guys think about your own personal life, we only have so much time in the day to get certain things done. And anytime that we start something new, it takes a lot of energy and effort to make it happen. And it's not just the time factor, it's the thinking about it beforehand and preparing for it and trying to figure out how to do it, and the mental and emotional energy it takes to actually get it done that then zaps you of that energy to do something else later. And easy examples of this are like diet and exercise, or waking up early, like coming up with a new routine. It just takes a lot of effort and energy to make it happen. So there was a period of time, and I probably should do this a bit more, where I was eating a really strict plant-based diet. So my cholesterol had been a little bit high, and I was wanting to eat healthier, and so I was like, I'm going to do this particular diet. And what was challenging about it is, first of all, there was some emotional capital that it ate up because I had to think about it a lot. I was really wanting to get it done, so it sort of consumed my mind a bit. And then I had to figure out, like, how do I actually even do this? Like, what does shopping at the grocery store look like, to get to eat this way? How in the world do I go out to eat and eat this way? And so it ate up all sorts of space in my mind and actual time. But then as I got used to it and started to figure out what things to buy and how to go out to eat, and my body adapted to it, it began to be easier and easier to where you just didn't have to think about it much anymore. And so the same thing with working out. So in fact, once we build habits into our life, we can actually start to accomplish more and more and more things, because habits take things that we do actively and in many ways turn them into passive pieces of our life that don't take as much energy to get done. So the same thing is true in the organization. So each process is kind of like a habit. They're hard to institute, they're hard to get going, but then once they're in place, they add some consistency to the company, they add more efficiency to the company, they allow you to operate with more smoothness. And when they begin to take on or take off in the company and people start to adapt them, it creates a synergy, and the company can now go further with that process or that habit in place than it could go before. And so you think about doing this with one process at a time, after another. Before long, it starts adding energy and synergy to the company that you start being able to accomplish things that you couldn't before. So the only way to be able to operate with $2, $3, $4 million in revenue is if you have processes in place. And getting to those numbers requires having some processes along the way. So for instance, I would begin to develop processes, and they can be super simple. They don't have to be really complex, but things related to recruiting, hiring, and training. Like, here's the way we're going to do this. And so I won't go into all these other examples. You guys can reach out to me if you want to talk about some of those, but here's how this can actually pay off. So let's say recruiting is just a pain in the butt, and the whole training process, and you've got managers involved in it, you got admin people, and it creates a bit of chaos, and it distracts people from doing other things that ideally they could be doing. So if you're able to find a way to streamline that process, it would allow your managers to focus more on the work that they do, which will in turn create better relationships with customers and better service, which then will allow you to be able to grow more smoothly. So one small process could have a ripple effect in the organization. That's good. Okay, number 5, this one in our coaching group, we beat this drum a lot. And it's that bigger clients are better. So big clients, by this I mean whatever you're doing now. If you're going after $50, $100, $250 a month customers, I'm talking $500, $1,000, $2,000 a month customers. So there's obvious reasons for this, and I really want you to set your sights high, is that bigger customers allow you to hit your revenue goals more quickly. So if you want to hit that $2 million mark, it's way easier if your customers are $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month, as opposed to $300, $400, $500 a month. Secondly, this is a big one, okay? Each customer, as a general rule, is about the same amount of trouble. So if I could see all of you all in a room right now, we have a lot of people in this webinar, and I said, okay, how many of you all have some really small customers that are a pain in the butt? They are calling all the time. They always have issues. I mean, you know who I'm talking about. You would love to get rid of them. And they just require a lot of effort. And all of you have small customers like that. And some big customers are like that too. But the idea is that every account, regardless of the revenue, has a customer contact that company is paying you and they're expecting something from you. So from a relationship standpoint, every customer requires something from you. Now, let's just say on a scale of 1 to 10, you've got the demand of the customer. So let's say we got somebody right in the middle that's a demand level 5. If I had to pick between a $4,000 customer and a $400 customer, both of them at a demand 5 level, I'll take the $4,000 customer all day long, right? Because it's going to come with a lot more profit. And so I would rather trade 10 small customers for one bigger customer, because it's going to reduce the load that I'm going to have as a company. Now, and then if you can do that multiple times over, you can grow faster, you can have smaller client load, which is going to be a little bit easier in terms of burden on you operationally in dealing with customers. And in many ways, you come out ahead. So as you grow, constantly be looking to get bigger and bigger customers. It's going to give you more flexibility. Bigger customers often are less budget conscious, so they're not going to nitpick you over $50 or $100. They understand they're already working with big budgets. So my encouragement here's how to practically put this into place, is that give yourself an account minimum. So maybe say, we're not going to take an account less than $500 a month anymore. We're just not going to do it. And if somebody calls, say our minimum is $500 a month. If you're comfortable, if that number if that works for you, or you feel like we're going to be in the ballpark, then we're happy to come out and look. If not, we're probably not a good fit for you. So early on for us, back when we were at $1 million, $1.5 million revenue, that number for us was $750 a month. Then it went up to $1,000. Then it went up to $1,500, $2,000, and now for us that number is like $4,000 is the minimum that we'll take. We didn't start there, but that's where we've ended up. So I would encourage you, as you're thinking about growing, to give yourself a minimum and start intentionally going after bigger clients. And it's going to help you get those revenue numbers, help you hit that $2 million mark a lot faster than if you tried to build it with $200, $300, $400 a month accounts. Okay, last, number 6 on our key things necessary in the organizational part of this is that you should operate on a shoestring budget, or maybe I would refer to it as you should do your best to bootstrap this thing. So I'll put some texture on this as well, that what I've seen a lot of small business owners do, a couple of different things that I think hurt their chances of getting to this $2 million mark, is number one, they take out loans. All right, I think loans, I realize interest rates are low, but also any form of debt, not only does it add risk to the organization, which is something few people really factor in, but debt is also an anchor that drags you down. There are payments associated with that. And when you're a small startup company, particularly in our industry, rarely are people getting a good ROI on that debt in terms of reinvesting it into growth. And so my advice to you is allow cash to be king, and to really work to not use debt in order to build your company. The second challenge or mistake I think people make is they extract too much money out of the organization, and which makes them more hesitant to grow, because growth does eat up cash flow. So even though your revenue is going up, it takes a bit for that cash flow to catch up because there's a lot of expenses early on and you're not getting paid for 30 or 60 days from that new customer. And so there's a book that I read a while back. I think it's called The Breakthrough Company, and it's sort of like a hybrid between traction and good to great. But it's basically like, hey, how do these small companies become really good, what I would call like medium, like how did $2, $3, $4, $5 million companies become 50, 100, $200 million organizations? There's a concept that they pulled out in their research that's called crown the company. And the idea was that all the decisions we make are to put the interests of the company first. And so the application here to financial is don't suck all the money out of the company for yourself. So reinvest it back into the organization, knowing that your payoff will come in time. So, farmers, they plow the fields, they plant the seeds, and they keep out the weeds, and it's not until fall that the harvest comes. And in a similar way, I think we should plow, plant, water over time, and knowing that the payoff will come. So just as I think about this personally, we did this really quite a bit in our organization. And it wasn't really until we were at, and I'm not saying everyone needs to be this way, but we invested in people a lot and kept our salaries pretty small for a long period of time. And what that allowed us to do was build something here that then once it began to take off, once the snowball started rolling down the hill, the rewards did end up coming in time. But it took 5, 6, 7 years of really plowing the fields to then begin to see those financial rewards. And so I would just be tight with your money and reinvest the money back into the organization to help yourself grow. And I think when you do this, it's when you crown the company in this way, combined with the factors that we're talking about, I think what you're going to end up with is 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, you're going to look up and see that you've made it a good way down the road of hitting this goal that we're talking about. Okay, guys, that wraps up. It's really got us right at our time. We're just under an hour here, and if you guys have any questions for me, you can go to our website, Elite BSC. There's a contact form on there that you could reach out to me. Sign up for the webinar. For those of you guys that are in the mastermind group, post those up in Basecamp or shoot me an email. I'm happy to get with you on this. For those that are in the group, I'll have a copy of this webinar made available for everybody. And if you want to schedule a coaching call or chat about any of this stuff, I'm more than happy to do that with you. So thanks for attending, and we'll connect with you guys soon. Take care.